All right. So, welcome to the Saturday morning call. Uh, it's the 3rd of May, and that it's also evening time in the U.S. We have a special guest on our porch today, Jesus, and Mikey is with us here. Um, and so let's start talking today. Ivan, can you show up and tell us your question?
Yes. Yeah. The question I had thinking was what about wise reflection? This is something Ajahn Sumedho say quite often in his Dhamma talk and sharing. So just curious what Dhammarato think about that.
All right. Here is the reference to which he goes. Wise reflection is actually in Sutta number 2, the Sabha Asava Sutta, and that it is in the section of, let us say, things to overcome by using. And that basically in there, they're talking about the four requisites. Now, Ajahn Sumedho broadens that quite a bit. So let's first off talk about the four requisites. The first one in there is the robes, and that we reflect wisely about how we are going to dress. And possibly the way to look at that is that um wa- reflecting wisely about how we are going to dress is only for protection. That in fact you can see worldwide Buddhists generally uh dress quite simply. There is generally dress codes at various places. For instance, some people wear all white, and some wear black and white, and some those who really don't uh, come to the Wat for Buddhas, but rather for tourism, they're also requested to cover up um, at least below the knees and over the shoulder. So the monks wear the traditional robes, and the robes originally were done by used cloth. Now, this is starkly different from Christianity, where you have to wear your Sunday best. But within Buddhism, we reflect wisely of dressing simply, only to cover the body, to cover the parts of the body that would be offensive to others, and to cover the body for um, oh, weather, gadflies, raining, that sort of thing. Now we have to understand that the Buddha lived in the tropics, and so the simple robes would be enough. But when the Sri Lankan and the Laotian and the Thai monks come to the United States and live in the northern area, they're not used to that kind of weather, and so they generally will bundle up. But it's only for the weather that they will wear hats. That in fact, uh, there is a sutta to where people saw the Buddha sitting up on the hill, and he had his robe over his head, and they came and approached him, and he took his robe covering off the top of his head, and they could see that he was a shaveling. That's what they called it, and that they were expecting a rishi with dreadlocks, and so they were unhappy because it wasn't who they thought it was. Because of that sutta, monks are typically do not wear any hat or any clothing on top of the head to make sure that they are dressed so that they can be seen easily as shavelings, as opposed to wearing heavy hair and dreadlocks and whatnot like that. So that's the
Yeah,
wise
okay.
reflection of the robe. Yes, go ahead. I can hear somebody talking. Is that you, Carwan?
Oh no, I think it's the girl. Can't remember her name. I muted her because I think she unmuted on accident.
Uh-huh. Can you understand what she's saying?
I don't think she's saying anything. Let me unmute her again.
Okay.
No. Mm.
So does anybody have any questions about using your clothing wisely? All right. So the second one would be food. And the food reflection actually is quite famous. Many watts that are associated with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, they'll have that on a card. They do this at both. I think Deepa Bhawan is also the International Dhamma Hermitage at Wat Suan Mok, where we read specifically, with wise reflection we eat this food, not for beautification, not for aggrandizement, but only for the nourishment of the body, to put away painful feelings like hunger, and to not bring on any new bad feelings like being overstuffed or overfull, that we eat wisely. And that's all that it says, by the way. And there's a whole lot of people who, I think that it came from Hinduism, and it got started back in the 1970s about vegetarians. But the Buddha wasn't a vegetarian, he was an alms rounder. He went and he took whatever the people would give him and was satisfied with that. And so that's the way that in Thailand, the main meats would be fish, chicken, and pork. This is actually quite a lot of fish that they eat here in Thailand. But almost always the meat, whatever it is mixed with other things, mixed with rice and vegetables and whatnot like that. But Thailand, as a Buddhist country, is definitely not vegetarian. The other point is that there is very little dairy products here. That this was never a cow growing place, and for that reason, the only place that you can find milk is in 7-Eleven and Macro, Tesla. I mean, um, Lotus, Tesco, because those are Western, and so they'll bring Western milk in. There's actually one place in northern Thailand where they have a Danish company has a dairy farm. But other than that, the Thai people are generally lactose intolerant because that's not part of the diet. But mostly it's rice and fish based with chicken and pork on the side. So, with wise reflection, we eat our food. Now, that can be taken a little bit deeper in the sense that the Buddha, in other passages, talks about how to eat, in the sense of when you have a mouth with food in the mouth, pay attention to what's happening on the inside of the mouth. Reflect wisely what's happening inside of the mouth. You know, in Western culture, we use on cell phones, or we'll have a dinner party where people are talking, and that the food people really don't pay attention to it. Maybe the first bite, and they'll say, this is so good. And then after that, they've lost it. They're not paying attention to the food at all. They're paying attention to basically what the food looks like rather than what it tastes like. And so wise reflecting of our food meant that we're actually paying attention to the heat, to the texture, to the chilies, to the actual taste of it. And that in this sutta that I'm mentioning, the Buddha also talks about it to the point of that we empty the mouth completely so that there's not even a grain of rice left in the mouth before we prepare the next bite. Most people are playing with their food while they're eating. They're using their hands and they're cutting meat and getting the next potato ready and all of that kind of stuff rather than paying attention to what's happening actually inside of the mouth. So this would be wise reflection while we're eating our food, is we're actually paying attention to what we're eating, paying attention to what the mouth is doing. So the third item would be housing. That they normally keep the housing very, very simple, that the monks actually stay in a kuti, which is just a hut. There is also a sala. Now, the small salas are basically just four poles with a roof over the head with a dirt floor. But more modern salas will have a floor. But this is what they mean by a sala is that it's got no walls. I don't know how they manage Dhammasala in India because that's pretty cold. I think that they've got walls in their sala. But that we have the housing for the protection of the weather, and also to keep flies and mosquitoes and gadflies out. But I remember very specifically at Wat Suan Mok, we couldn't keep the birds and we couldn't keep the snakes and even the large geckos. Can't keep them out. They'll find a way to get in. That in fact, here in this house several years ago when we moved in, and for many years we had one of those large geckos. They call it a jingjo. They said toke like that. And then we lost him because the 2K stepped into the uh, we have a sometimes when we have mice, we'll put a plate that's got very sticky stuff on it, and so the gecko got in there. But I'm very happy to announce that we've got a new gecko, a new uh, big lizard that's living in the house with us. So wise reflecting of the kind of house that we would have. One of the things that I've known for years in the United States, the building industry wants to build a big house to make a big profit. But in Thailand, very rarely do people build mansions. They build little houses with 10 roofs because they're kind of taking it easy rather than being proud of where we live. We're kind of getting along with whatever there is. So, um, this is how we would live our house life, is by reflecting wisely that we don't need much. We don't need a big mortgage. All we need is just simple. And then the last one was wise reflection. We use medication, that there is always a use for some sort of medication, and that commonly in the time of the Buddha, the two major medications was um, urine, either from the monk or from a cow, because it's a disinfectant, and also it becomes acidic when it sits for a while. And the other one was alcohol. Now we know that there's a precept about sura nurya macha pamatadana, and what that means is that we don't drink or use alcohol for getting drunk or getting crazy. Uh, that we use alcohol as an ointment, or sometimes maybe as a cough syrup, but it's not used to get drunk. It's used to as a medication. Uh, they also used aloe and other herbs in the time of the Buddha. Then, in fact, that was the place where Ayurvedic medicine had already taken hold. Now, one of the interesting things about that is that in the time of the Buddha, that all the really smart intellectual people quit their jobs and became bhikkhus, and that one of the professions that did that was the medical profession. In fact, it got to the point that people wanted to ordain as a Buddhist monk in order for them to get medical attention, because the medical doctors were all monks. And so that actually then became part of the tradition of the uh, ordination process, so that people who have communicable diseases, oh, like tuberculosis and cholera and smallpox and those kind of things, people who have those illnesses are not allowed to join, because they would not only take a lot of care, but also they spread those diseases. So we do want to take care of the body, take care of it medically. We do want to take care of the body by eating correctly. We do want to take care of the body by housing, and we do want to take care of the body by clothing, but we always reflect wisely about how we do that. So, Ivan,
Yes.
I'm sure that you know that Ajahn Sumedho talks about wise reflection more than just the four requisites.
Yeah. Hmm.
Can you say
So,
something about that?
yeah. How he often approach it is, uh, well, because usually when people come to the practice of Dharma, people have this very idealistic ideas of how it is, like uh, ideas of shouldn't be angry, ideas of shouldn't be I don't know, with desires, or shouldn't, like, there's this idealistic version of them, I guess, and how he how he often mentioned it's just like this, the anger is just like this, desire is just like this. He's often pointing to the way things are.
Hmm.
I think that's what he talks about, wise reflection. Yeah.
All right. So, actually, there's two ways of looking at it: wise reflection about the past and wise reflection about the present moment. What Ivan is mentioning was from Ajahn Sumedho. He talks about looking at what you're doing. Reflect wisely about your behavior and about the way you feel. In fact, he's actually using the term wise reflection when he's actually referring to the practice of anapanasati in the present moment. To um, uh, uh, they say, thou shalt not get angry, thou shalt not do this, that, and the other thing. And so that in Western context brings a lot of guilt. Also, because we're not supposed to be angry, people will be angry and then deny that they're angry. uh you see people really angry, talking loud, using low class language. You can even see the people actually on Discord get angry from time to time. They become annoyed when we're telling them the truth. So uh, they do not reflect wisely about their feelings. If we reflect wisely, we can see that this is anger. Now, that does not have the quality of thou shalt not be angry. It has more the quality that if you are angry, you can see that you are angry. Because normally, if we're having these rules about thou shalt not be angry, then it's easy to deny it. Oh, no, I'm a good person. I'm all right. I'm not angry. And everybody in the room knows they're angry except for the guy who's denying his anger. He's not wisely reflecting about actually what he feels. And when we look at it from the perspective, from the way that the mind works like that with these rules, that's basically Freud's superego, or Eric Burns' parent, where the parent is critical. Thou shalt not get angry. And who, me? I'm not angry. But uh, the whole point then is that we can, by wisely reflecting upon whatever we're doing, uh, we can then nurture ourselves. Who, me? I'm angry. All right. Let me calm down. Let me settle down. Let me cool off. And we can do that in a nurturing way rather than a thou shalt not way. So, this is what we actually mean by wisely reflecting, that we can reflect and we can see the way we feel, the behavior that we have. That in fact, that's much of the Satipatthana Sutta is talking about when, uh, in reference to the body, is look at your behavior. Look at what you're doing with your hands. And we can actually train that by slowing down. So instead of grabbing something, what we do is we gently reach out, grasp it, touch it, bring it up. And then while we're holding it in the hand, most people, when they're holding something, they're holding the object, they're thinking about the object, or maybe they're not thinking about their objects. The actual example that I'm referring to is that when people are holding their cell phone and or their keys and they drop it because they're not reflecting wisely what their hands are doing. We actually more likely are paying attention to the object, like the cell phone or the keys, rather than paying attention to the hand holding the object. So, wise reflecting would be the watching of what the hands are doing while it's holding an object, as opposed to um, paying attention to the object itself. So, everything then comes from the outside to the inside. Wise reflecting means to look within. So that's how we would deal with it in the present moment. Now, let's start looking at it in the sense of the past. We spend a lot of time in our thought systems of the past. If you start looking at what you're thinking, you'll recognize that you spend a lot of time thinking about the past. An example of that is that the road to Tam's house um, has gotten kind of washed out because of the rains that we've had this year, and it's really, really bumpy. So, if we continue to think about that road being really bumpy, then that's thinking about the past. We spend a lot of time thinking about the past. Wise reflecting about that means that you see that you're thinking about something that's not here right now. It's something that happened before. It happened over there, or way over there, as opposed to what's happening right here. Now, as we do that, we can reflect wisely that we're thinking of the past. That means that we now can come back to the present moment. And one of the ways that we can do that, in fact, is by saying, yeah, this happened 15 years ago, and that happened over there 12 years ago, or whatever like that. But look at what's happening now. Things are really good right now. that people often want to ask about my past. I don't care much about my past, except for one particular thing is that whatever happened in the past, it worked well enough to get me where I am now. And wow, where we are right now, that's really, really great. And so reflecting wisely about the past will bring you to really how wonderful it is in right now. An example of that is that at one time I had a house that had a water heater that kept having trouble, and I had to crawl under the house on a regular basis. So whenever I think about that house, I say, "Wow, I'm really glad I'm not in that house anymore." In fact, it was my grandfather's house. He built the thing. Um, Actually, it was a ramshackle little place in 1920, and he remodeled it over the years, but it was still, it was a big house, but it was a dump, and it was constantly in need of repair. And I'm saying that only from the sense of reflecting wisely about that house. Well, I'm glad I'm not there anymore. So this is the way that you want to start reflecting upon your past. When you start thinking about something that happened a long time ago, you can immediately come to this present moment with that feeling of, wow, I'm really glad I'm not doing that anymore. That what we're doing right now is really, really good. So these would be the wise reflections of the four uh, items. They call them the requisites because if you don't have those four items, it's really hard to practice the Dhamma. You can see, in fact, a whole lot of people all over the world, they don't have those four requisites. They don't have enough food. Some of them live in Los Angeles or even in Seattle in a tent. They don't have adequate housing. They don't have adequate clothing. They don't have adequate medical care. So this is something that we can plan on is to make sure through your own wise reflection that you do have at least adequate housing, at least adequate care, at least adequate food, at least adequate clothing, just enough so that life is easy. An example of that is the Salvation Army. I suppose everyone here has heard about the Salvation Army and that they would go out on the streets with their musical instruments and their funny little army uniforms and try to get people to come to listen to their preaching service. But the important thing is that they fed people first. It's really, really hard to hear a sermon or a lecture or the Dhamma when you're hungry. That in fact it happens on a constant basis. That when I was a monk, we have it to where in the morning the people prepared the food, and then the monks would chant while the people waited. And for some reason, the food got cold. I would like, and I'd gotten used to throughout my life hot food, but as a monk, I don't think I ever got any hot food ever. By the time it was prayed over, it was cold. So after the monks eat, then the lay people eat, and then the Dhamma talk. After everyone has eaten, that's the way that they operate. Okay, so wisely reflecting, it's good to have the body in good shape, that it's well fed, well clothed, well housed, and well medicated. Not medicated in the sense of the way that Westerners medicate themselves, but adequate medication, just enough. Then we can learn the Dhamma. So, does anybody have any questions? Ivan, do you have any questions? Did I cover the topic for you well enough?
Yes, very well covered. No question.
No
I'm
questions.
reflecting.
Does anybody else have any questions? All right. So, next question, Santiago, you're up. What was your question?
My question is, when, for example, like when you're a Christian, right, and you're reading a Bible or something like that, there's a translation, right? Now, the translation is based off, whatever it is that the person is citing from and, their ideas of the world and what it might be. So I'd like to get a copy or some sort of way to read the Buddha's suttas that does not come along with commentaries. It's just like strictly focused only on what the Buddha said, that there's no things coming in it and getting mixed in with it. And, you know,
All right.
right now I'm reading the Bhikkhu Bodhi translation. I've been thinking about switching to the Bhikkhu Sujato translation. So I don't know.
All right. Well, let's talk about it in the sense of the time frame. We've kind of known for quite a long time, hundreds of years or so, that all of the stuff that was in the Tripitaka, the three baskets, the Tapai Sadok, the Tipitaka, all didn't come at one time, that it was written over a long period of time, very much like the Bible, except that much of the Bible was a lot later than people would think. And that's also true about the actually accumulation of literature. That we know, for instance, that there were some things that were done, written down, actually in the time of the Buddha. The Sutta Nipata and the Udana and the Teragita and the Teragita and the Terigita were all done in the time of the Buddha. And then at the time of the Buddha's death, there was the Majjhima Nikaya that was done in a council. All of the other stuff, including the stuff that's part of the Sutta Pitaka, was done later. Much of it, in fact, was done at the time of King Sok, especially the Dinga Nikaya. After that, hundreds of years later, was when the commentaries were compiled. Now, the commentaries then are both interesting and not reliable. They tried to give a context as to how the sutra was done and things like that, to where much of it is actually conjecture. That stuff wasn't done at the time of the Buddha. It was done hundreds of years later. But actually, some of the commentary is actually quite useful, is quite valuable, because it was still done way back when in the ancient times, which makes it different from modern times. So our context or reference would be in modern times, but we can go to the commentary to see what culture was like in the time of the Buddha and the centuries after that. Now, we can also appreciate that, we'll say it like this: when one becomes a monk, there is very little to do. Mostly the thing to do when one becomes a monk is to learn to stop doing and just being in the present moment. But many of the monks couldn't do that, so they wound up writing stuff down. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa did some writing. He did a little bit of poetry, but mostly his Dhamma that's in book form was actually recordings of talks that he gave, very much like what we're doing here. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and the good senior monks don't write much, but a whole lot of monks had nothing left to do other than pencil and paper, and so they wrote stuff down. And so a lot of the stuff that was written, even in ancient times, was written out of boredom. They didn't have anything else to do. They didn't really know how to hang out, and so they wrote. And this is the a good example then of the Abhidhamma, and later the Visuddhimagga. The Abhidhamma was done about 200 BC in that area of time, but it probably took hundreds of years to write it. And then we have the Visuddhimagga, and the Visuddhimagga is based a lot on commentary and that sort of thing. Now, I will speak about the Visuddhimagga just a bit, and that is that it seems to go in the right direction on several points. In fact, the whole book is written according to the Satipatthana, where you have the body, the feelings, the mind states, and the mind objects, and the whole work is done that. But it seems like that what's happened is that it follows the sutras up to a point, and then makes a 180-degree turn. Uh, and what I mean by a 180-degree turn would be out of the noble back into the ordinary. And so over time, there's been a lot of criticism of the Visuddhimagga. One of the things that was said was that it was written by a group of people who didn't practice the Dhamma. They just copied the Dhamma, and they got it wrong. Sophomores, wise fools. But there is another way of looking at it, and that because there's other literature. The guy who was in charge of compiling the Visuddhimagga was done by a monk named Buddhadasa. And Buddhadasa was a Brahmin by birth. He was a Brahmin by family. He went to Sri Lanka and compiled the Visuddhimagga because that's where the commentaries were kept. But he wrote back to his family, and we do have some evidence that said that he actually knew what he was doing, that he wanted to take Buddhism and make it a part of Hinduism because his family and his clan made money off of it. It was Brahmanism, and they got land and they got property and all of that by getting people to pay for their rituals and whatnot. Now, throughout Southeast Asia, the Visuddhimagga was actually quite loved. It was especially loved and still is especially loved in Sri Lanka and in Burma. And Thailand was also, especially northern Thailand, was very much into the Visuddhimagga. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was trained on the Visuddhimagga. But as he began to really see what was going on, he got less and less enamored with it, to the point that before he died, he said that if they would take the Visuddhimagga and the Abhidhamma and throw it into the ocean, book burning, that the teaching of the Buddha would be better off without it, because it's quite misleading. And so this is what I would have to say, that if you really want to know what the Buddha taught, we have to have a two-step process. One is that you have to kind of know the Dhamma and to know what it's about. This is what I got as a benefit from Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, and that's what I'm revealing to you guys, is to be able to know how to read and what to read. And then number two, you can see all of these various translations that are not very good translations, but you can read through it to be able to gain what was actually there. An example of that would be the word serious or striving. These are ordinary words used by ordinary people, but the Buddha actually didn't talk about striving. He talked about persisting, and there's a complete difference. That you can keep doing something easily over and over and over again, or you can try to do the whole thing all at once. That's the striving. And so you've got a long time to haul that great big load, and the easy way to do it is by taking the load a little bit at a time. In other words, you can't solve your personality problems That's a big load. But what you can do is change your mind right now. That's easy. One little thing at a time. Okay, so the persistence then is keep doing it one little thing at a time over and over again, as opposed to struggling and striving with a great big issue. That's actually going back to anger. People say, "Oh, you're not supposed to be angry ever." But the right way of looking at it is, "Oh, I see the anger and ill will right now. If I can see it right now, I can do something about it. But I can't do anything about it if it's a big habit and be able to change the whole thing all at once." So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it answered it. But,
Pardon?
yeah, it answered it somewhat. I think yeah, I mean, that's what you do, but I think, like, the problem I see is that sometimes you'll be, like, on page 100, and then, only then, you start seeing the problem, you know? You start seeing some word that or something that the Buddha never said, and you're like, "Wait, what is this? Doesn't this contradict, anatta or something like that?" And then you go and it's like try to look for the word, and then you're like, "Oh, no, this is just eternalism," and then you gotta pick up
Mhm.
another translation or some other book and do and so, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just about
Over the
having right view.
centuries, a lot of eternalism has snuck into Buddhism. In fact, you could say that the Brahmins and it's not really proper to call them Hindus. But in fact, let me define Hindu for you. Hindu is actually an English word that was put in the 1600s by the British to encapsulate the hundreds of religions that were in India at the time. I mean, you've got the rishis, and you've got the Jains, and you've got the Brahmins, and you've got the you've got the ashrams that have monkeys, and you have the ashrams that have rats, and you've got sacred cows, and it's just all over the place. Vishnus and Shivas, and just hundreds and hundreds of things. And in that regard, there really is no such thing as Hinduism. And that one of the things that they tried to do, the Brahmins especially, was try to take the teachings of the Buddha and bring it on board. They tried to make Buddhism, because Buddhism was quite popular in Asia and had been all along up until about the 12th century when it was wiped out. But before that, the Brahmins hated the Buddhist. Why was that? Because the Buddhists don't see a profit. Everything is given freely. It's cooperative. In fact, you could say that it's the most socialistic thing there is. It's the most communistic system that there is in the world. Everything is shared, everything is easy, nothing is selfish about it. And so the Brahmins, they didn't like that because they couldn't make a profit on it. And so that's why they tried to take Buddhism in. And one of the ways they did that was by poisoning the literature, making it look like that Buddhism, in fact, was eternalistic, to where we've got enough evidence in the suttas to show that the real teaching of the Buddha is not eternalist. That in fact is always right here, right now. You can say, in fact, that eternalism is exactly opposite of the teaching of the Buddha. Why is it exactly opposite? It's because the teaching of the Buddha is always about right here, right now. What's happening in this present moment, right here. As opposed to eternalism is about the deep, dark past and the deep, dark future. Before you were born and after you die. That's what the most important thing is. Why is that? Because nobody can do anything about that at all, except go to the Brahmins and pay them to pray for you. In a way, the Brahmanism of ancient India is very much like the way that Catholicism operates today. You have that priest. You can't do it by yourself. You got to go to the priest, and the priest is going to then intercede for you for a price. So that's what ordinary Buddhism then. Ordinary Buddhism is actually a kind of Hinduism, to where the real teachings of the Buddha. That's why I will make a distinction and say Buddhism, Buddhist. I'm not Buddhist. I'll let ordinary people who like the word can have the word Buddhism and Buddhist. What we're going to use is we're going to use the word teachings of the Buddha to make that distinction. The noble teachings, the supramundane teachings, the teachings that actually are liberating, as opposed to a religion. So, if you understand that a lot of the literature has been, in fact, polluted, it's actually even polluted even today. We have people who pollute the religion or pollute it back into a religion. And the example that I will use is the word jati. Jati in the Pali means birth, but it has a wide variety of meanings. It actually has more of the meaning of the beginning. An example of that would be the birth of the blues, when things get started. But you have some pretty famous translators that every time that they translate the word jati, they translate it into rebirth. They use the word rebirth, and that actually looks very much like reincarnation. That in fact, let me see if I can pick on somebody. Santiago, you'll do. What's the difference between rebirth and reincarnation?
I don't know. I think they're the same thing. Like, I mean, rebirth, reincarnation. You're being born again. You're coming again in the flesh. Um,
They're completely different.
are they?
Yes, they're completely different. Nick, do you know the difference between rebirth and reincarnation?
Well, reincarnation is like a soul moving to another body, and then rebirth is like, well, as I've heard it described in like a Mahazi retreat, it's like a transmigration of consciousness, like the mind state that like continues to go and inhabits another body. But I don't really know the difference
But
between those.
that's still the same thing. That's still reincarnation.
Mm.
Rebirth is something different. Mikey, you're up. Do you know you know the difference between rebirth and reincarnation?
I'd say the primary difference is reincarnation, involves a soul, and with rebirth, that doesn't need to be the case. Things
Doesn't
can
need to
just,
be the case specifically. There
yeah,
is in rebirth, there is nothing to be reborn.
sure.
Okay. This actually comes out of Sutta number 38, where the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, thought that, like Nick was saying, that one experiences the the actions from the past going from place to place. Well, that's the same thing as reincarnation, that there is a being or there is a consciousness that experiences around from place to place the actions of the past. And the Buddha made sure that he understood. It was really hard on him, by the way. Called him a Muga Parissa, which means a stupid person with not one shred of wisdom, because he thought that it was consciousness that transmigrated, which is basically the same thing as the soul. A lot of people would then say that the soul and the consciousness are the same thing, to where the Buddha very specifically pointed out that consciousness is dependently arising in the present moment based upon the conditions of the moment. that everything is always brand new. And so there, there is the result. One of the examples that I've used is that it was because of the Holocaust that the nation of Israel was born. Have you anybody ever heard that? That it was the Holocaust that caused the. Guess what? That was actually not true. The nation of Israel was born because of legislation and edicts by the British government. And ever how they decided that, but you have to say one condition after another, after another, after another, a long line of conditions. But the country of Israel was actually mandated through legislation. It did not get caused by the Holocaust. So when we can understand it like that, we can also understand that, yes, there is going to be a future, and things that happen now will affect the future. But it's not affecting you, that you only get affected always in the present moment. And if you don't like what's happening, then that's what you're doing right here in the present moment. If you're dead, then it's not going to affect you very much, is it? So you can do things now. You can, Carnegie and Rockefeller and Ford, those really rich guys, the robber barons of the early 20th century, they left foundations. Those foundations still operate. They still exist. They're still doing some good and some bad things. But John D. Rockefeller and Henry Ford, they're dead. So what you do will have some lingering effect, but it's not going to affect you. Now, if it did, then you would remember that. And then they say, oh, well, we've got this kid that came from this village and he knows all about his past lives. A lot of that's been debunked. Same thing with magic, okay? Let's always go with what we can do, can see, that we can wisely reflect upon and see directly. So when they use the word rebirth, the original concept of the rebirth is that, yeah, things keep going on, they keep happening, the ball is rolling, the foundation still exists, but it's not yours, it's not you. So this actually, if you can think of it, it's like a two-step operation. Up at the top, you can see rebirth and reincarnation together as one thing, and it's delusional. But we can come and step down one step and say, yeah, there is no reincarnation, but there is rebirth, but it's not mine. And then we can take one more step down to the point of, well, since it's not mine, so what? So this is actually, you could say that in a way, rebirth was a way of getting out or escaping the delusion of reincarnation. But most Westerners nowadays, they don't even know the difference between rebirth and reincarnation. You could think that rebirth is actually should be your escape hatch, your escape mechanism. Yeah, there is going to be a future, but you're not going to be in it. In fact, most of us are not even in the present moment. We're living in the past. We're not being wisely reflecting about what's happening right now. So that's what I would have to say. That's the skinny. I won't give a long talk about rebirth and reincarnation, other than to say who or what is it that can be reborn? Only circumstances. You don't even remember when you were in diapers. How are you going to remember when you were in the womb? You can't even remember when you were in the womb. You can't even remember when and how you were conceived. You can't remember being a spook running around the neighborhood looking for couples having sex so that you could jump in at the point of conception. These are all just stupid stories. And the question is always, can you see what's happening right now? Because only when you can see what's happening right now is there liberation. That reincarnation actually is a story of a trap, of samsara. You can't get out of it. You can't get out of it. Over and over and over and over again, you're just going to have one life after another that sucks. I know people who say, well, this life sucks too much, and so I'm going to wait for the next life, and then I'll be happy. Good luck with that. Why don't we practice right now and spend the rest of this life happy? Why do we have to be miserable for the rest of this life so that we can be happy in the next? That doesn't make any sense. So, does anybody have any questions right now off the top about rebirth and reincarnation? Because they're not the same thing. That's like saying the red book and the blue book, or the Old Testament and the New Testament, and then right now. So, Jesus, what do you think?
I'm just very satisfied with the conversation. Thank you.
How about you, Nick? Do you have anything to say?
No words.
Were you the one that mentioned about talking about rebirth and reincarnation in the Discord?
No.
No, you weren't. Okay. Santiago, what about you? Do you have anything to say?
I'm good. Good
How
enough.
about you, Ivan? Did we cover Achan Samedo's wise reflection?
Yes, it really helps giving me a clearer picture of how simple it is, and yes.
Yeah, right now is easy. Past and future, that's hard. That's tough nookies. You can't change the past,
mm, mm,
but you can enjoy the heck out of what you're doing right now, even if that requires a change from being unhappy to being happy right now.
yes.
And how do we do that? Again, with wise reflection. Look at what you're doing so that you can make a change. If you can't see what you're doing, you're not going to be able to change. But if you can see what you're doing and see it clearly and directly, you've got power over it. You have power to change.
Mm.
So, Dhammarato, you have something to say?
No, just thank you.
Oh, come on, man. Lay it on me.
Thank you very much.
1 minute, but okay. All right, Ben, what do you have to say?
All good, Dhammarato. Thank you.
All right, how about you, Michael Swift?
Super good. Thank you, Dhammarato.
And Simon, this I think is your first time here. Do you have something to say? Come on, man, argue with me.
No, it's good. I mean, you destroyed my mind, my conceptions of reincarnation.
All right. Let's see who's next. Is that Jonesy? Are you here?
Hi, Dhammarato.
Hello, my friends.
I don't have anything to argue with you about, but I do have 3 separate questions since you called me out.
All right.
And we got
Go ahead.
1. In the first talk, you were talking about the wise person paying attention to their hand first, would you say there's another part of that with, like, I don't know, say more diligent practice, that maybe it's easier while in first jhana, but the person pays attention to both the hand and the phone?
Well, we use our hands a lot. That's why I would mention it. But you could, when you're walking, notice you're walking. Notice the steps that you're taking. All right. When you're eating food, notice the taste of the food in the mouth. In other words, whatever you're doing, pay close attention to what you're doing. With your hands, grasping, reaching, touching, dropping, letting go, any of that kind of stuff, because we use our hands a lot. One of the ways, in fact, that we can talk about it is that both for hygiene purposes as well as for mental development, keep your hands away from your face there, Jesus. Don't touch the face unless you do it and know that you're doing it. All right? Yeah. If you're going to pick your nose wisely with proper reflection. So that's it. Okay, so Josie, that's what we mean by that.
Finger. More
Pardon?
about the finger and less about the booger.
Pardon?
More about the finger and less about the booger.
Yes, exactly.
Never really paying attention to the booger.
Mm. So if you're
Okay.
cleaning your ears with a Q-tip, pay attention to the inside of your ears, not the Q-tip. I think that's almost hard to do, is to pay attention to the Q-tip. But paying attention to what it feels like, where it's going. Pay close attention.
Cool. Second question. Is it a fair characterization to say that rebirth is like, in like super layman, not magically terms, like noticing time passing moment by moment?
Yeah. You can also
Okay.
use the phrase "been there, done that." Notice when you're doing something. I mean, there is a thing called deja vu, which means we're just doing it all over again. Been there before, been there, done that. Okay, so that takes wise reflection, is to see what we're doing and notice that we've been doing this before. Did it before, didn't help. Let's do it now wisely. Maybe we can learn something.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So who's next?
Dhammarato.
Yes.
So there is this famous monk. I don't know what to think about it. They say rebirth is like a candlelight, like a candle flame that is like a new flame every moment. And then when the body dies, the flame goes to another candle. What do you think about that?
Well, that's true as a beginner's way of looking at it, that if you have a candle that has a flame and you have a candle that does not have a flame, that flame is not going to go to that other candle until you put it close enough to get it hot. And then it's going to go on fire. But now, in that new candle, the flame is a new flame. It's not the same old flame as the other one. And in fact, if you look at it closely, you can see that even this new flame is not the same flame as it was when you lit it. That it's always spitting and sparking and smoking and wavering and all kinds of things. As Herodotus says, you can't put the same foot in the river twice. The river is changing, the foot is changing, the mud is changing, everything is different moment by moment. That's actually the wise reflection, is to see the changes that are happening right now. How could something possibly last hundreds of years, this thing called me? When in fact, I'm not even the same as I was when I was in diapers. I'm not the same as I was when I was in grade school. I'm not the same as I was in university. I'm not even the same as when I was a monk. And when I was a monk, I was constantly changing. I'm not the same person. Different people. Same asshole, but different people. So that's the way, yes, that's an example, is the flame. Not the same flame. But reincarnation teaches it is the same. Which is basically the same thing as Christianity, that when you die, you go to heaven. Who is that you that's in heaven? Are you in a regular body like you have now that gets measles and mumps and chicken pox and broken bones and all of that? Or is it some sort of new body? And the joke is that why should I want to go to heaven? Heaven is full of pickpockets, thieves, liars, murderers. And you say, well, how is that? And he said, well, that's what they were doing in their life. And then they got forgiveness. So now they're all in heaven. Where are the good people? Good people don't want to have the thing to do with heaven. Heaven is for those who needed forgiveness because they were not behaved well. Except that that's the really strange point is that, oh no, heaven is within you. The kingdom of God is within you. It's right here, right now. It's not going to be something that happens after you're dead. Why should you wait until after you're dead? You can be in heaven right now. Paradise, here it is. A lot of Christians, they want to have a heavenly life because they think that the life on this planet is hell, but that's up to them. You think God's going to make heaven any better for them? Oh, no. If they're the same person, they're going to have all the same problems when they get to heaven. They're just going to have all of their shit in paradise. They're going to take heaven and turn it into a hellhole just by being there. Okay? So, anyway, if we begin to see with wise reflection over and over and over again that we keep changing and changing and changing, in fact, that gives us the power to make some real change so that you can change the way you feel. You can change your attitude. You can change your thoughts through wise reflection, through seeing things clearly. Let's see who else. Michael. Is that Michael Mitchner?
That's the other Michael.
Yeah, there's Michael Swift and Michael Mitchner, and then there's Mikey, and we got mics all over the place, even here.
I think RJ have a question.
Okay. Go ahead, Ivan.
No, I was referring to RJ. I don't know. I saw his hand. I saw he has his hand up just now. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was thinking of a question. I'm not sure. I was thinking like,
Yes, RJ, go
how,
ahead.
yeah, I was thinking how important is it to think about reincarnation or rebirth. Like, I was not much concerned about this. I was thinking that it's okay.
I'm not
Like,
understanding.
do we really have to understand it?
Pardon?
Do we really have to understand reincarnation, rebirth?
No. Better to forget all about it and just be here now, because reincarnation is all about a deep, dark past and the deep, dark future.
Okay.
And the Buddha's teaching is look at what you're doing right now. Change what you're doing right now. If you're unhappy right now, be happy now.
Yep.
Always the now. An example of that is that you're thinking about, oh, I've got to do this tomorrow, and you go to sleep thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow, and then when you wake up, guess what? It's not tomorrow. It's now.
Mm.
We don't have any tomorrows. Tomorrow is just a mental concept. Really doesn't exist. All we have is right now. Okie dokie, do you have something to say?
No, thank you, Dhammarato.
Is that Timon? Is that you? I see people that only got one letter, and I don't know who they are. Samantha, let me hold it. What do you got to say?
Hey, I don't have any questions over here. Nothing to
Pardon?
argue about,
What'd you say?
neither.
Go ahead.
I've never heard well on here.
Mikey,
Everything's
can you
good
help me with
though.
what she said?
She said no questions and nothing to argue about.
Oh, all right, all right, all right. Anna, what you up to, Anna?
Thank you very much, Dhammarato.
All right. So, why don't we finish this off? Anybody else got any last things to say? Mikey, why don't you take it from here? Let's go land this turkey.
Yes. Thank you for this reflection today, this wise reflection on the Buddha Dhamma. And thank you, friends. So glad to see so many of you here. If you'd like, go ahead and post a date and time in the one-on-one calls chat. I don't care if you're new or old, seasoned or not. Let's get some more one-on-one calls going with practitioners. It's a great way to build community and make friends in the Sangha. So we got the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the triple gem. It's all worthwhile. And yeah, go check out OpenSanghaFoundation.org. There's been a lot of interest in the site lately. So if you'd like to make some blog posts, look at some watts, or if you're interested in volunteering for the site, let us know. And if you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, go ahead and hit subscribe, like the episode, leave a comment, and feel free to share this Dhamma content. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all,
Dhammarato.
my friends.
Buddy.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dhammarato. Yeah.